I'd like to extend my thanks to Dr. Alvin and the AeHIN community for inviting me to speak about the HL7 FHIR community process with you today. So yes, as announced, I'm talking to you today about the HL7 International FHIR Community Process, or the FCP. And as mentioned, I am a member of the HL7 International FHIR Community Process Coordination Committee, the FCPCC, along with the actual FHIR Product Director, Graham Grieve, who I'm delighted is here with us today as well. So let's get underway. These are the topics I'll be covering today. First, we'll look at the problem statement. I find with these things, it's always a good idea to understand what you're trying to address or resolve when you put a new initiative or a new process into place. And so we'll cover off what that problem is that necessitates the need for the FHIR community process. Then we'll give you an overview of the FHIR community process itself, which in big part consists of a number of FCP requirements. So we'll have a closer look at what those requirements are. And following that, we'll look at other aspects of the process, including registries, the use of icons, importantly, governance, and finally, benefits. And at the end, I'll be more than happy to take questions from any of you. All right, so let's start with the problem statement. So I think the key thing to appreciate here, I assume at least that most of you are familiar with what the FHIR standard is. It's an interoperability standard from HL7, and it's an open interoperability standard. And for that reason, because it's open and completely unencumbered, any individual organization can freely develop and publish open or public FHIR specifications for implementers to follow. Now, whilst this is a wonderful aspect of the FHIR standard, it can lead to problems, and those sorts of problems arise when many specification authors are developing implementation guidance in an uncontrolled way, which then creates inconsistent standards or specifications, which then actually fly in the face of our interoperability goals. So without a process or framework which can ensure that we have a consistent foundation for these FHIR specifications, we're likely to see lots of duplicate effort and many not following the best practices in the use of FHIR. And for those of you who've been around this space for a number of years or decades, who are familiar with one of HL7's other famous standards, V2, the idea of Z segments, which was a way to provide extensibility to V2 messaging, is one example of this. Everyone used the Z segment mechanism to create their own effectively extensions, which led to a lot of non-interoperable version 2 or V2 solutions. So we're trying to avoid that, or that at least that's the problem we're trying to address with the FHIR community process. So ultimately, the lack of alignment is going to contribute to fragmentation and non-interoperable FHIR-based solutions and market confusion. And these are very much the problems that we're trying to address with the FCP. So what is the FCP? It's an HL7 international defined and governed process, which aims to address the problem I've just outlined by establishing a consistent foundation for participants to produce FHIR specifications. The FCP operates by providing a set of requirements, we call them the FCP requirements, which guides the global FHIR community to develop specifications which follow best practices, have better acceptance by the broader implementer community, and lead to more interoperable solutions. Now, a lot of this will seem familiar to you because this is very much the way standards development organizations operate at the moment. Sorry, my slide just went back there. There we go. And indeed, many aspects of the FPC leverages the best practices followed by good standards development organizations. And so we're trying to, in a way, bring those practices into the broader community through the FCP. Right. So the way the FCP works, as I said, it sets requirements. Those requirements fall into three broad categories. There are requirements for FTP participants. Those are parties or individuals or individuals or organizations who wish to publish FHIR specifications. The next category are FCP projects, and those are the projects which an FCP participant initiates to develop FCP specifications. So great examples of these might be open source communities. They might be accelerators like the Spark Accelerator. You'll find various individuals, organizations who initiate projects to develop FHIR specifications. And finally, there are sets of requirements for FHIR FCP specifications themselves, which align to the FCP. So we're going to look at each of these categories in turn in the next few slides, just to give you more of an idea of how these work. Before we jump into that, the last slide on what is the FCP is really just to share with you this very key link. It's a short form URL on hl7.me/FCP, which takes you to the dedicated FCP website. And on that website, you'll find all the resources you need to fully explain the FCP to you. It's where you can find the icons, the registries, the participants who are already part of the FCP, and lots more than that. So that's a very key link for you to take away from today's presentation. All right, so on FCP requirements, and starting with requirements for participants, participants who want to publish FHIR specifications under the FCP have a number of requirements before they can be recognized as an actual FCP participant. The first key one of those is that they need to publish what we call an FCP compliance policy. That policy is a document which describes how the participants' projects and their FHIR specifications will meet the FCP requirements for projects and specifications. So the ones which we'll go into in the next few slides. Participants also need to notify HL7 of all their new FCP projects and specifications, which are covered under that compliance policy. And if they have any projects or specifications not covered by that policy, but they still wish for them to be recognized as FCP projects and specifications, they are required to submit those for assessment under the corresponding FCP requirements. So as an example of that, the compliance policy might state default settings and best practices like versioning schemes or the way community will be consulted, which apply for most of their specifications, and on occasion they may need to deviate from that policy. And in those cases, they can separately submit those deviating projects or specifications to HL7 for assessment, and that way they can again be covered by the FCP. So that's participants. Projects, the requirements for projects are really around project documentation. Projects need to clearly define who their leaders are, what the leadership of the project is, the license and intellectual property contribution requirements for the project, the rules for community participation in the project, whether they are closed, completely open, or somewhere in between. The project's engagement and collaboration forums, so think of platforms like Confluence or SharePoint and so forth, even chat forums like Slack. The project's funding arrangements and provision of community support. Very importantly, projects must be clear on what their actual potential or perceived conflicts of interest may be. And lastly, the project's development cycle, exactly how the project is going to go about developing specifications from initiation all the way to publication. And lastly, the third set of requirements fall on, of course, on FHIR specifications themselves. So some of the key requirements for specifications are all FHIR specifications that need to meet the FCP need to declare conformance to the basic rules in the HL7 FHIR Implementation Guide publishing requirements. FCP specifications also need to be registered in appropriate FHIR registries. They need to provide documentation or rules which cover licensing and any other encumbrances, the methods for raising issues, so platforms like Jira, known security, safety, and privacy issues, as well as quality and versioning. And last but not least, we don't sort of set and forget FCP status on a specification once you've achieved it once. If enough time has passed, or the FCP requirements have changed, or indeed if the participant's own compliance policy has changed, there are rules which would subject the specification to reassessment for various reasons, which are covered in the requirements as well. So all of these requirements, because they're so important, HL7 actually publishes these in a standalone FCP requirements document. And we also make this document permanently available at the permalink on the screen at the moment. And just in case you're wondering, I will be sharing all of these slides. So you'll get all of these links. No need to write them down quickly or hurriedly now. And we will get on to how these requirements are governed in the next couple of slides. So assuming you are approved as an FCP participant, you have projects and you have specifications which are being added as FCP compliant, they can then be listed in the FCP registries, which are maintained by HL7. So this is a very important thing to note, because once those specifications are registered, you basically they become far more discoverable by the global FHIR community in terms of what they do, how they're going about it, and very importantly, the fact that they have met the requirements for the FCP, which gives them a much higher bar, and thus more trust can be put in them by the community. And in that way, it addresses the problem statement, which I mentioned at the beginning. All of those participants, projects, and specifications, once authorized, can then use the FCP icons, and we have the basic FCP icon, which is on the left, followed by an approved participant icon, an approved project icon, and an approved specification. Participants aren't required or mandated to use these. We very much encourage them to do so, given they've gone to all the effort to ensure their FCP compliance. And so once you have that, you can add these to your website or to indeed the project pages or documentation, and finally in the FHIR specifications produced under the FCP as well. Now, governance, very important. It's one thing to have a great process like this, but unless it's continually maintained and evolved, it tends to, over time, not be that useful. And so HL7 has put a lot of work into how we get the governance for the FCP quite right. The key thing to remember here is that the FCP is governed by the HL7 FHIR Community Process Coordination Committee, or the FCPCC, on behalf of HL7 International. The FCPCC is responsible for defining and maintaining the FCP requirements, assessing and approving applications from participants, projects, and specifications, managing those registries we spoke about. This is a very interesting one, the second last bullet point. It's the FCPCC, just noting that there will be eventually very many FCP participants out there. We have also put in place rules that allow the FCPCC to delegate some of its responsibilities to what we call local FCP coordination committees. So far, we have one of these in the HL7 Australia, HL7 affiliate, and that then enables those committees to assess and approve FCP participants' projects and specifications within their realm or region of influence and under specific conditions. That just sort of spreads the governance burden more globally, but of course always leaves the FCPCC as the ultimate responsible party for overall global governance of the FCP. And finally, monitoring and the ongoing success of the process and ensuring that we continue to improve it on an ongoing basis. So two of the members of the FCPCC are here with you today. Graham Grieve, the creator of FHIR, and HL7 FHIR product director, is the chair of the FCPCC, and I'm also a member. All right, so on to benefits now. These are some of the key benefits we see through the FCP, and we'll start with participants themselves. If you're a participant, the key benefits we see for you would be that your specifications and projects will have increased acceptance by the community. They'll be increasingly more discoverable and will attract more participation and adoption. For implementers or adopters of those FCP or FHIR specifications, there'll be easier discovery of specifications, so no need for you to create one yourself. It'll be easy to find one which has already been created and has met the requirements of the FCP. And thereby you can have increased confidence in the quality of that specification, as well as clarity on how to contact the specifications maintainers should you have any queries regarding the specification, or indeed to contribute to its further evolution. And finally, HL7 and the FHIR community as a whole, we'll have better quality FHIR specifications, less duplicated effort, increased reuse, coordination, adoption of the standard outside of HL7, higher likelihood of interoperable solutions, and most important of all, hopefully better health outcomes. So that covers the overview of the FCP today. I hope you've found that helpful, and at this point, I'm very happy to take questions.
Thank you, Sir Reuben. We actually have a few questions in the chat box already. So the first one is from Dr. Alvin. How will a group know that they are following the FCP? Is there a checking tool we can use that tells us we are compliant?
Not completely. There's no automated tool because a lot of the requirements are sort of at a business or process level. There are certain things which tooling can certainly support you with, like ensuring that you meet the basic requirements or that your QA report for your fire artifacts are, not returning any errors, for example. But things like, providing your development process or the rules you follow or what platforms you make available. These are really things which you have to declare, and the FCPCC can ensure are actually in place if necessary. But to a large extent, the FCP works on a bit of an honor process. Anyone that's behaving dishonorably or making false claims in respect to their compliance policy, as an example, will be found out very quickly and fall into disrepute in the community. And we all know the community talks to each other a lot on various platforms. So it's not in anyone's interest to do that. And we don't expect that anyone will do that. The risks of doing it are too high. But for some technical aspects, Dr. Alvin, there is certainly some automation which can be brought to bear to assist with that.
Thanks, Sir Reuben. Dr. Alvin has another question. Is there an electronic form we can fill out that helps with completing the documentary requirements of FCP?
Fantastic question, Dr. Alvin, and I'm delighted to let you know that we've put in place some facilities to do just that. First off, when applying to become an FCP participant, we have put in place a JIRA project in HL7, which sort of facilitates the process of you applying to become an FCP participant. And secondly, in relation to the compliance policy, we've actually created a template with lots of guidance and help on how to complete that properly, with suggestions as well as acceptable answers to the various responses you can give to how you meet the requirements. And all of those resources are on that FCP dedicated website, which I shared the link for earlier.
Sir Reuben, our next question is from Dr. John Dalisay. Can a national HL7 affiliate or consortium coordinate a country-level FCP that encompasses multiple projects under a shared governance, funding, and community participation structure? If so, what additional requirements or considerations would apply?
That's a really great question, and again, I'm delighted to have a really good answer to this one. The answer is yes, in short. And you may recall earlier I mentioned the notion of local authorizing committees. The idea there was always that we anticipated that whilst the FCP does really well at addressing things at a global level, we anticipated that at local, sort of national or regional levels, there might be additional requirements which supersede or complement what's in the international FCP. And that's exactly what we've seen starting to happen in Australia. In Australia, the HL7 Australia affiliate, with support from the Commonwealth national government, has put in place an Australian fire community process, which takes all the great things in the international FCP and adds a few additional requirements to that. Additionally, it's governed by its own committee called the Australian Fire Coordination Committee. So it maintains the Australian fire community process, which has some additional Australia-specific rules for Australian implementers or Australian fire specifications and projects, which all works hand in hand in relation to the international FCP. And the International FCP Coordination Committee has authorized the AFCC to do just that, with the condition being that it applies to specifications and projects developing specifications for the Australian realm. So sorry, that's a really long-winded answer. The short answer is yes, that's exactly what can happen, and we support doing that.
Yes, thanks, Sir Reuben. There's a follow-up question from Dr. John. So, is it possible to have multiple FCPs operating concurrently within the same country?
That's a really good question. It's certainly conceivable that if you have a local FCP, that you may have some parties that feel they need to be sort of directly aligned to the international FCP as well as the local FCP. We haven't seen any cases of that happening as yet, so it's sort of purely theoretical at this point. We would say that if there is a local one which sort of complements and supersedes the international one, that you'd probably be better off just going with that one, because by doing so, you are implicitly aligned to the international FCP as well. But I suppose it's possible that some parties may have some reasons for doing that. Perhaps they market their products to countries outside of the local country they operate in. That's perhaps one example. So it's not impossible. It can be facilitated.
Our next question is from Dr. Zoe. It reads, can a research project or implementation effort submit an application?
So if that's an application for the research project, which is developing a FHIR specification, I don't see any reason why that wouldn't be eligible to put itself forward for the FCP. That might be one I'd throw to Graham. We've not yet seen that, but Graham, do you have any thoughts on that one? Our party's been allowed to speak. Sorry, I assumed that.
Oh, I'm allowed to speak.
There you
What's the
go.
question? Yeah, what's the question?
Research organizations and research projects and their participation in the FCP.
Yeah, well, I mean, from my point of view, they're not any different. If you're writing specifications for the community, then you owe it to the community to behave, you know, with good faith with the community, which is really what FHIR community process is about. So, sure, research projects and research, and if you were doing community work, go for it.
Thanks, Graham.
Thank you, Dr. Graham and Sir Reuben. There's a question from Dr. Marco Perpetua. What are the legal or ethical guardrails when using FHIR tagged health data anonymized for AI model training or commercial partnerships?
Wow, that's the question of the moment, isn't it? Honestly, that's not my space at the moment, and I might again defer to Graham, who may have an answer to that. I know he's been hearing a lot about AI and anonymized data. It's not something that the FCP directly caters for at the moment. But Graham, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, this is not a FHIR subject per se. It's a generally, a general ethical thing. So I'm just commenting from my experience. First of all, there's no truly anonymized data. If the data is sufficiently anonymized that it's not re-identifiable, it's generally become useless. So there's a trade-off, but you've got to hunt down a lot of places to truly de-identify the data. So that's one practical and then ethical concern, which is how anonymized is the data. Some countries have legal frameworks that require patients to consent to some degree or other for some kinds of AI research. It depends on the purpose and the intent and the legal coverage of the research itself. So you'd certainly want to figure out the legal rules. I'm not sure which country this question is from. Maybe the Philippines.
Philippines.
Yeah, so Philippines. So I don't know. Alvin might comment on what the frameworks for consent are for research use in the Philippines itself. But then looking beyond that, there's a whole lot of questions about data and AI and outcomes. One thing that's very passionate for me is if you're going to train an AI program on a set of patients, you should be prepared to report very clearly the nature of the patients that you trained on, and the nature of the outcome data on which your training was based. And it's reasonably good, easy to get good procedural data around what happened with a patient in process. Observations, vital signs, lab reports, clinical notes. it's not always good, not always easy to chase down and get outcomes, because usually the outcomes are after they've come out of the clinical process that you're documentation sources from. So you need to be very clear about what kind of patients you included in the data set, what kind of patients you excluded, and then what kind of outcome data you had. If you talk to like mainstream patients, then they are covered. But if you start talking to people with various kind of genetic mutations, I mean, most of us one way or another, or if, you know, disabilities or metabolic diseases, and they're like, I don't know whether this stuff applies to me. I don't know whether the training data is aware of people with my conditions, and there's no way to even find out. And so they often say to me, look, I'm in a permanent clinical trial of one, which is myself. And so I think that that one is very important to me and is very rarely followed, because we don't care about the patients, we just care about making money. And then that gets back to the big ethical question of, there's so much money going into AI. I mean, every month it seems to go up by an order of magnitude. It's just obscene. And I really worry that patients and patient outcomes will be abandoned for pursuit of financial outcomes. That is a worry shared by a lot of people in the healthcare system, but you know, we can share that worry, but we can't resist billions and billions of dollars by flooding into the system. So yeah, those are my legal and ethical concerns. I don't know if, yeah, Alvin, you got some things to say, I'm sure.
Yeah, AI is a very popular topic right now. I mean, globally and in the Philippines. It's not our topic tonight, but Marco, we appreciate the question. I think we should have another webinar topic on uh, integrating AI into the clinical workflow, because in the end, asking AI what's the best restaurant and asking AI what's the fastest way to cook an omelette is fine. But when you start using AI and uploading our patient data, then we're really crossing a very thick red line. Because number one, we don't know what is the corpus behind that AI engine. Are they all Australians? Then therefore, I don't think that's reusable to the Philippine market. Are they all African Americans? And therefore, we cannot translate all of that corpus to the Asian market. So so many questions about AI. But going back to the FAR community process, the story behind my request for the FAR community process, Ben, is was here last June 16 to 17, and he observed a connectathon that we conducted. And he essentially suggested that if you really want to do it the right way, then you might want to look at the FHIR community process. And then, of course, he recommended you. That's why we cannot say no, right? Because Graham, Graham said Reuben might be available. I appreciate Graham being
Yeah.
here right now. So my question is, the blind cannot lead the blind. Um, how will I want to follow the FHIR community process, but how do I know that we're doing it the right way? And therefore, it goes back to you, the Australians who started this. And I see that the Australians are listed as one of the first people following the FHIR community process.
Yep.
How hard was it? Um, do we need you to like guide us in the Philippines in our first FCP process? What
hmm
effort does it entail to do that? I mean, I know you're busy, Ruben, with your
hmm
actual work, but how
Yeah.
can we tap onto the Australian experience on FCP, get that to the Philippines and the other 10
hmm
interoperability labs that we have in the network? How can we amplify what you've learned
Right.
FCP in Australia? Over.
Sure. So, look, the good news is that it's really not that hard. We've been very fortunate in Australia to have Graham close by, and also a lot of passion from our community, because when the Australian FHIR community process was sort of coming into being about 2 years ago now, when it was actually part of the Spark FHIR Accelerator, just initiating it. There was, so much passion and desire for us to start doing standards properly and embracing FHIR at a national level more than ever before. So we had a lot of people that were really interested in making it work, and in particular, people interested in leadership and just making the system better, not necessarily even technical people. But in terms of the process we followed, really, a big part of it was David Rowlands. I'm not sure if you've met David yet. He's currently the chair of HL7 Australia. And David was, I think, the first vice chair of the Australian FHIR Coordination Committee as well. And he wrote up a document called the Australian FHIR Management Framework. And this was an attempt to bring together everything happening in FHIR standards development in Australia, and in particular through HL7 Australia, in a framework. And a big part of that framework was adoption of the FHIR community process, and as part of an Australian FHIR community process, along with a coordination committee for it. And in many ways, that initial piece of work then kind of, I wouldn't say forced, but sort of reignited the fire, so to speak, in HL7 International, to sort of better formalize the international FHIR community process, to better facilitate, well, first of all, to address some of the issues we knew we had with it, but also to better facilitate what Australia was trying to do at the same time. And I was very fortunate that the chair of both committees was Graham, which also helped speed that along. So I would say to you that a lot of the heavy lifting has actually been done in just ensuring that the committees work well together, that things are established, things are well documented, and we actually have processes to make the FCP work. So to your question, what do you need to do? What you really need to do is have a read through the FCP requirements. And well, I guess decide what it is that you want to do. So there's a couple of pathways here. And I think the key pathways for you to consider are, do you simply want to be an FCP participant under the international FCP, in which case you read the requirements and you complete the compliance policy for yourself, which describes how you will do things, and then you make the application to become an FCP participant. So that's the simpler pathway. If you want to be a bit more adventurous, shall we say, and you actually seek to become an authorizing committee, i.e. you want to create a local FHIR community process for your realm or region, then you become an international FCP participant, and then you establish your local process, and then seek to become an authorizing committee with the International FCP Coordination Committee. You specify how you will operate, which kind of participants you will authorize, which specs and projects you will assess, and the FCPCC will consider that application and then grant you that authority with specific conditions attached where necessary. So those are the two pathways. But obviously, always happy to help on that journey. I realize some things aren't always as straightforward, and we welcome feedback to make things easier. The committees are here to serve, and in particular, the International FCPCC committee is always happy to hear from people interested in the FCP, whether they want to implement or participate. So I'll hand to Graham, who's probably got something to add.
Yeah, I wanted to say that the technical requirements are not difficult. It's like, tell people what you're doing, keep good records, tell people how to participate, explain how it works. They're not technically difficult. The difficult bits are when there's contention, when there's argument, and finding people who have the interest and the respect to maintain integrity when people want to take shortcuts. And sometimes the people who want to take shortcuts are really hard to resist because they're the people who pay. And that's why they want to take a shortcut, because they're paying and they want to pay less. And so that's when it matters. And so I think that while it's not technically difficult to do all this, what you need is a good culture. And so I would recommend that one or two of the people who do this if you're setting up an FCP or trying to conform to the FCP, one or two of the people who do this should observe and even participate in the HL7 governance processes to get a feel of what's involved and why it matters and the kind of struggles that happen. There's no charge for that. There's no need to travel. All of that can be done remotely. It's just a question of time, which in some ways is the most valuable thing you have anyway. But that would be what I would recommend. It's not technically difficult, but you need to establish the culture, and you can do that by becoming an observer who's connected to the international community doing this stuff.
Right.
And because it's a challenge in every country.
Okay. So we'll do that, Graham. For each of the 11 labs, we'll start joining the international FCP process. Reuben, I'll get some tips from you how to do that. I'll
Of
ask for
course.
one to two people from each of the 11 labs. Of course, the 11th lab is Australia. So
Right.
join the international FCP and then imbibe the culture, participate, understand, and maybe at a later at their own pace, they can create their own local FCP. By that time, they would have already interacted with the international community. And there's a question from John Lemuel about how long did Australia's FCP take end to end, and were there any key factors that influenced your timeline? Over.
I suppose that's an interesting question to answer because where is the end to end? I suppose I would say that the process of finalizing the Australian FHIR community processes requirements, as well as the broader HL7 Australian FHIR management framework, in which the AFCP sits, that took about I think about six months, and that's really because it's a very long document, and we did considerable consultation with the whole Australian community, and I think there were about the first version of that went out, and we had well over 100 comments from the community. Lots of interest, obviously, if they had that many comments, but there were lots of things which needed to reconsider, tweak slightly, or completely amend. And there were two cycles of that broad consultation. Once that was locked down, which included the terms of reference for the Australian FHIR Coordination Committee, it probably took about another 3 to 4 months to recruit all the members. There were some permanent seats from some key organizations like HL7 Australia, the CSIRO, and a few others, including the peak body for vendors. We had a clinical governance rep. So recruiting all of those people to resource the committee took a couple of months. So I would say, and Graham might want to jump in here because he chaired it end to end. It probably took about a year to get everything in place, but please note that that included things outside of the FCP itself. There was a FHIR management framework in there as well, and in that time we were also trying to get the Spark FHIR Accelerator all up and running as well, including work groups and things like AU Core, etc. So it sort of sounds like a long time, but sometimes doing it right needs that much time, and it was also very context specific in Australia. Us being quite many remote parts of Australia, and we wanted to make sure everyone was heard and their views taken into account. So I think that's the short answer. A year fully end to end and operational.
Yeah, and there were some Australian specific things in the past that we had to work around as well. And so as the combination of the past and the trying to set up much more than the FCP itself, the whole way of doing standards in Australia was very linked together with adopting the FCP. And so, thinking about the Philippines, that you could adopt it within a few months and just say, look, we'll lay out our processes. But then you've got to get everybody to get on board with that. However you go about doing that, whatever consultations you have, and the slower you go. Well, I mean, you can go slow because you're not listening and you're not doing, and it's just going slow. But if you're going slow because you're listening and you're doing feedback and you're making sure that's heard, then that's good investment. If you need to make that investment, it's variable depending on history and culture and backing. And one thing that we have, which you have in the Philippines, is relatively powerful state governments, and so all the states had to be on board, and so that was part of the process that slowed it down, is getting all the states on board, and then the other authorities that have to go, oh yeah, we have to, this is the way we're going to do it. And so the same thing, the tech, like the actual FCP process itself, it's a few months of work, but bringing everybody on board, well, it's how long is a piece of string, and how many people, institutions do you have to bring on board? In other countries like Thailand, I see Boon Chai's here. Hi, Boon Chai. My impression is that Thailand is pretty tight and well orchestrated as a community, and so it might be a lot quicker in Thailand. Of course, Boon Chai is probably going to tell me, nah, it's a mess like every other country, and it's going to be hard for us. I don't know. It's just my impression talking to Boon Chai. And hello, Boon Chai. We haven't met for a few years, have we?
Yeah, thank you, Graham, for thinking that Thailand is more organized on that. I think it maybe we are novice, and I think the expert is very few. So we are in the state that trying to kind of get acceptance. We haven't get the focal point that doing FHIR, like to do the shortcut, something like that. So maybe this is another difference between the country that are more advanced on FHIR, and then people get exciting, and then many group are trying to do job to create the IG or something like that. But just to be competitive and do a shortcut, then the integrity and then to follow the standard of FHIR has been weakening. In contrast, like Thailand, maybe Philippines, the other, we are just the novice. So we learn. So the more we learn, it's kind of we learn about the what is the constraint, what is the standard, and then we don't smart enough to do the shortcut. Then it may be easier for the country that getting into that. But I know that FHIR, like you said in the statement, the question statement, that we are afraid that we are going to go the same direction as the HL7 version 2 messaging standard. That is so many options and then so many duplication. So because of, I think to me, this is the price we pay for the more easy, flexible standard and the more rigid. And this is the price we pay. And to recognize this, and then you got the community of process. This is, I think, the good lesson learned, that we are now aware that we have to do act quicker, and so that our standard will not just going the same direction HL7 version 2 messaging standard. That's what I feel. Graham, you may be disappointed that we haven't got really progress on that. I fight a lot on getting people to kind of getting into FHIR, but with all of you, the HL7 International, to popularize the FHIR, the US, the UK, the Australian, that make the country like Thailand said that eventually we have to go like that. We have to go this path.
I'm
But
disappointed by
thank you. At least thank you that you are the pathfinder or the pioneer to kind of the go through with this process, and then we can learn from that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, since we're here and talking about this, I just want to point out to everybody that we've done a lot of work this year with the World Health Organization on language support. So if one of your issues is how resolutely English the specification is, that's not necessarily true of your specifications anymore. You can, it's plenty of work, but you can do other language work. We've put a lot of investment into that. So just thought I'd point that out while you're here in case that is of help. And otherwise, we are as always here to help all of you move your healthcare IT along. In the long term, of course, the WHO Smart DACs are coming and will be a requirement for all of you. And do all of you know about the work this year on vaccination certificates? Maybe that's worth another seminar at some stage, Alvin, but the WHO is moving to digital certificates later this year on a really accelerated timeline that will be relevant to lots of countries.
That's great. WHO.
Yay.
How about so when I look at the FHIR community process page, and I'm curious, Reuben, Graham,
Yes.
only Australia is on the list. So if the
Yeah.
Philippines will start work on the Philippines, I hope Thailand and all the other labs will also start the process. But are
Mhm.
there other countries actually that are right after Australia, but they have not yet
Yes.
registered?
So we are a little bit behind on updating the registry, not very behind. We just need to formally notify the participants that they have been successful before we add them to the registry. But I think a key one, which I don't think the party would mind me sharing, is HL7 Europe. They've put a lot of work into their application and their compliance policy, and they are very nearly there right now. And so all the hope is that all the specifications that which their affiliates are developing, and certainly things for the European health data space in FHIR will hopefully all come under the FCP in the fullness of time. But yes, there's considerable interest, and Graham and I are fielding questions and queries about this, sometimes from very unexpected places, about interest in this. We've briefed the HL7 International Council of Affiliates on what it is, and we've had some initial queries about that as well. So yeah, look, it's certainly early stages, but there's already considerable interest. Once people understand the benefits case for doing this, and it's exactly what Boonchai just outlined there. We are trying to bring a level of responsibility to all the power that FHIR gives you as a standard and flexibility that gives you, but a little bit of responsibility to temper that for the good of everyone and to make the standard more successful as an interoperability standard, whilst not sacrificing the flexibility it gives you to develop interoperability specifications.
I would like to get this opportunity before we end this to thank Graham. You know, I used the picture that I'm taking with you into 2019, and then your law of the interoperability that helped a lot. You know, because of you are the icon of the FHIR, the standard, and it helped for the create awareness and adoption. When we said, you know, this is the one who initiate, pioneer, father of the FHIR, the standard have used globally. Then the credential that we can get access to you, that get more easier for the community in Thailand to kind of no, this is not Boonchai speak. This is the international icon speak. That's good. Thank
So,
you very much.
Doctor,
Well, I mean, if that helps, I'm glad.
what are the laws of interoperability, Dr. Bonchai?
He said three is the three law of Graham, are you still remember of your three law of the
I do.
interoperabilities?
Do you remember
I
the
put,
three
I,
laws?
The
I put
first
the
one
link
is
in the
the
chat.
interoperability is not about the technical, it's about people.
That's right.
That is
Absolutely.
the key. That is the key.
Mhm.
The second thing is that interoperability is very complex. You can get away like shortcut or something like that, but this complexity will not go away. It will be there.
It will indeed.
And
Yeah.
the last one is that there is three things that you cannot get together, right? Like the
Flexibility, affordability, and I forgot the third one.
Cost. Cheap.
It's cheap. Okay, cheap.
Cheap, flexible, and interoperable.
So I really appreciated, Graham, the first law, rather than
Mhm.
saying interoperability is all about fire, you rather said interoperability is all about people. I really appreciate that. When the father of fire does not even say you need fire, but you need people working together, I thought that was really the magic sauce, the secret sauce behind any standard is really the community agreeing to use the standard the right way, the proper way that fits their local needs.
I
So
always
final word, Dr. Bunchay,
I
I'll ask.
always said that, the interoperability, there is three level, like the business people. That's first level. The second one is the data, and the third one is the technicals. And people are always just push the problem to the technical and data, not the people. And the 80% is the people. That's why everything, the complexity they come in. So Graham law and my reflection and my lesson learned are aligned, and that is good. I think this is the key that we have to uh, give to the interoperabilities community standard data community, that we as a community, as a people, is the key, not just the technical or the data that that they can think that they can buy money over.
So
Mm.
it's the top of the hour. Graham, we thank you for the gift. We will take care of that gift. Don't worry. We'll make sure of that. Ruben, thank you for sharing the fire community process. We will assign one or two people per laboratory. And guys, this is our chance to have a picture with Graham Grieve and Ruben Daniel. So please take the opportunity to open your camera. I already got a picture with John Lemuel Dalisay. Remember him, Graham? You were here in Manila.
Yep.
So this is our chance with Dr. Bunchay, of course, our sensei.
Well,
Uh,
here we go.
call the shot. Who's gonna call the shots?
I'll take it,
Shari?
Dr. Alvin. Yes.
Taking picture with Graham, then you can go and show them that we are the community and we can access to the one who create the fires. That is our credit
Love it.
we can get.
Okay.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much, Ruben. Thank you very much,
You're
Graham.
welcome.
Thank
Thank you,
Reuben.
everyone.
Thank you,
You.
everyone.
Good night, everyone.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye bye.
Good night.